They're just talking about pussy the whole album, basically. Watch out, babies. Daddy has to do a review. What's up, YouTube? This is the God Bombs back again. I told you I'll be back to back. That was a Drake joke. Ye has returned with Ty Dolla on Vultures 2. And I was really excited about Vultures 1. I'm a huge Kanye fan. I know I don't look like it. And I tried to meet Ty Dolla one time at a club, but his bouncer was grilling me hard. I was excited about Vultures 2. I was pretty into Vultures 1. I thought it was a good album overall. I thought it was better than people were giving it credit for, at least from like the reviews and the reactions that I was seeing. I thought Vultures had some good legs to it. I thought that Ty Dolla $ign's soulful singing and presence really balanced out Ye's experimental tendencies and his kind of off-the-cuff style as of late. Kanye seems to be more interested in pumping out more content that's raw and kind of like a demo. It's kind of giving you a look into his artistic process lately. Starting with maybe Life of Pablo, I think his albums became less of these polished, serious things and more like stream of consciousness, which I would argue that he's actually ahead of the curve on that. I see some people whining online about how Vultures 2 feels like it was thrown together. It's just a bunch of demos, etc. I mean, if he just keeps releasing this series of Vultures every few months, I feel like his streaming numbers are just going to go up and up. Ultimately, he has the fan base to where enough people are interested in just whatever he's doing. So even if he releases stuff that's more raw and stream of consciousness, it might actually be a sign of the way the industry is moving, because I feel like Spotify is favoring artists that are just constantly releasing music, whether it's super polished, super thought out, super produced, or whether it's more raw. It doesn't really matter as long as some people enjoy it. As far as this album goes, I don't think it's as strong as Vultures. I think Vultures had a lot of songs that were catchy enough that it kept me coming back for more. It had stronger hooks on it. These songs on Vultures 2 feel like leftovers from Vultures 1, which makes sense because the same thing happened with Donda. There was a Donda 2, but it ended up just getting released in an exclusive format for the fans. I'm glad that Vultures 2 was released. I know some people feel like, what was the point? Because it's not as polished. It's not as catchy as Vultures 1. It's definitely not as polished and catchy, as memorable as Kanye's classic albums in his heyday. However, I think Kanye is kind of rolling out a new business model here where it's just like, let's go more raw. Let's go more stream of conscious. Let's invite people into our artistic process a little bit and just release things as we're doing them, rather than trying to craft the perfect meticulous album. Because at the end of the day, in the culture nowadays, you just never really know what's going to hit. As far as the songs themselves, I think Slide was a cool intro with the trippy, detuned organ. I immediately noticed that the lyrics are back to the same kind of like sexual, lowbrow themes that were all over Vultures 1. I don't know if I was expecting anything different necessarily, but it's definitely not different lyrically from Vultures 1. It's the same basic subject matter. They're just talking about pussy the whole album, basically, with a few little industry disses and insider bars thrown in there for good measure. I like the grimy tribal beat on Slide. I think Ye's flow is really weird, but I like it. It's different. That's what I love about Kanye. He's not afraid to experiment and be different. He's like the Pablo Picasso of the rap world. He's always challenging people and giving us weird stuff. And I think that when he's gone, people are going to truly appreciate what a genius that Ye was. Some people get frustrated because he just doesn't do the same cookie cutter format as everyone else, but that's his genius. He's constantly pushing the envelope, even now with these releases. Even when he seems like a hot mess, rolling around with his wife half naked all the time, and he's wearing these weird outfits. Everything he does is like this art statement, and I love it. It's just pure stream of consciousness, no filter. If anything, I feel like Ye is our modern day David Bowie, and we just don't see it yet because we can't appreciate him fully until he's gone. Time Moving Slow. I was wondering why this song wasn't just called Time, because all the other songs are like one word. It's kind of a rough mix. It sounds like an experimental beat that you could make in FL Studio with like a really loud piano plug-in or something. It was a vibe, but I feel like this song is where you start to feel like the production on this album just wasn't quite ready for release. Another thing, it seems like this album was delayed a little bit because they didn't want to get in the way of the Drake and Kendrick Lamar beef, which seemed to grab everyone's attention. Personally, I feel like if it was delayed, they should have spent more time trying to mix it and make it a little more polished. Field Trip. It's epic. Some really big features on it. Clearly, it could be one of the main singles from the album. I love how it cuts to a sample from Portishead's Machine Gun, which is a song that I'm really into. I wasn't expecting that at all, with Kodak Black rapping over it, especially. It's highly experimental, and it's really cool. I think it's very futuristic sounding. However, it's hard to hear the bars because the beat is so loud and the mix isn't really as clear as it could be. Fried is definitely one of my favorite songs, but it kind of feels like the Wish version of Carnival. It's obviously the same concept as Carnival from Vultures 1, where you have this choir sample of like a bunch of people chanting something and then they add a beat over it. Unlike Carnival, this song is not quite as catchy. However, it does feel like it will be one of the most standout songs on this album, and I plan to do a cover of it, so stay tuned for that. Promotion was pretty good. Ye has a cool verse. I like some of the bars on it. But again, it's just more songs talking about sex. I feel like this topic gets a little bit old. I want to hear some more like vulnerability from Ye. I'm missing some of that vulnerability that we heard on albums like Ye, Life of Pablo, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Yeezus. I feel like he's not really pouring his soul out to us on this album. It's just like, I'm riding high, I'm getting pussy, I'm successful, you know, typical themes that you would hear from any rapper. Husband is like feminist kryptonite. It's the exact message that feminists hate the most. All you need is a man to take care of you. Just trust him. It's like, I like it because it goes against the grain of how a lot of people are thinking these days. It's Kanye being Kanye. He doesn't care. It feels like the most emotional song on the album where he really opens up. And you could feel like he was in the studio and he was just on a roll, freestyling those vocals. And I think it works well. I like when he does that high gospel voice and just kind of wiles out and lets himself flow with it. It sounds like it wouldn't have been out of place on an album like Donda or even Jesus is King. I like it. I like when he goes gospel. Lifestyle felt like a continuation of Husband, and I feel like around this time the album really kind of settles into a groove here, followed by Maybe, which I love the song Maybe. It's warm, it's lush, it's experimental, it's electronic. It gives a little bit of that house influence that we've heard sometimes in Kanye's music. I mean, he grew up in Chicago where house music was huge. You hear it on classic songs like Fade from Life of Pablo, and Paid off of Vultures 1 also had that same house feeling. So I love how it goes into this instrumental zone and you just kind of vibe with it. Bomb is another fun experimental song. It features North and Chicago West, which are Kanye's kids. I love it. I think it's really cool. I think it's very out there, and I like that he's taking chances on this album and doing experimental things. I like how they're speaking in different languages, and I think it's a really fun song. At this point in the album, as a longtime fan, I was surprised when I heard 530 because I've heard 530 before. It's a leaked demo. So to hear it mastered on this album feels odd to me because I'm used to listening to it on YouTube in the unreleased Kanye tracks videos. I always thought it was a great song, and it seems like maybe he threw it on there on this album so that he could have a Drake diss here, because this whole dissing Drake seems to be like a popular way to get attention now. Not that this is the first time Kanye has dissed Drake. He's never been afraid to diss Drake, but it feels like this song was just like included as part of the package for the sake of some kind of headlines. I always thought it was a beautiful song. I always wonder why it was never released. I did feel like if he was going to re-release it now, though, especially since it's leaked and a lot of people have already heard it, he should have like updated his verse. The verse at the end is just kind of ad-libs, and you could tell some of the words he doesn't really have words for all the parts. He's just kind of like making notes. I would have maybe cleaned that up if I was going to re-release this song properly, but maybe he felt like the original vibe was so authentic knowing Kanye, he just probably thought the vibe was perfect and it should just be released as it is. Sky City is another demo that was on the unreleased Yandhi album. Shout out Yandhi. I feel like Yandhi is an amazing album that should have seen the light of day. And all these songs from it keep being released, whether it's songs that ended up coming out on Jesus is King or songs like Hurricane that came out on Donda, or this song Sky City now has made its way to Vultures 2. I just wish he had released the Yandhi project because it was so brilliant and so ahead of its time. I even heard some headlines that were saying that he was trying to clear New Body for this Vultures 2 album, and I just don't see why Yandhi wasn't released at the time. I know Ye had a mental breakdown, and that's part of his process, but I just wish more people knew about Yandhi. If you haven't heard it, just look up the Yandhi album. It's brilliant. That being said, I feel like Yandhi is better than Vultures and Vultures 2, but I'm still glad that Vultures exists. I hope he keeps doing more of this Vulture series. I think this team of Ye and Ty Dolla Sign is really a winning team. I love what Ty Dolla Sign is able to fill in some of the gaps in Ye's style, because nowadays Ye doesn't seem to have the focus that he once did to like craft a perfect song. It seems like he wants to kind of come in, do some experimental stuff, and then it's nice how Ty Dolla Sign like really fills in the gaps. I really feel like it would be great if they would just continue this Vulture series, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know if they can sustain the same kind of hype and the streaming numbers or the publicity that Ye is used to getting on his albums, because Ye is, you know, a top 40 artist. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure on him historically to have each album be number one. He's never had an album that didn't come out at number one. So I could feel like maybe he feels like that feels like a bit of a burden as an artist, because he wants to just release more music more often and probably doesn't care about like trying to make pop top 40 songs. It seems like he wants to more express himself with these deep cuts, which as a fan, I prefer the deep cuts anyway. So I'm here for it. Overall, I'm going to give this album a 6 out of 10. Obviously, if there's one song that stands out, it's just going to get picked up by the algorithm and people are just going to gravitate towards that one and ignore the rest. So I feel like this format kind of gives everybody what they want anyway. But obviously, there's a bigger lack of quality control that we're used to from an artist like Kanye, who I would argue up till the album Ye, he really had a track record of having high-quality releases with each release, and each release just topping the last one. And then that kind of fell off. Personally, I feel like he's got nothing to prove, so I'd rather just hear his raw creativity at this point. I find it fascinating. Even if it sounds like a demo, I still think there's so much magic in his music. However, I do feel like because there was a delay in the release, they could have spent more time polishing it up. I do feel like there's a little bit of a sense that Kanye's a little bit checked out. He's busy with some other things. And maybe the old Kanye would have really made sure that this was as polished as possible with the time that he had. That's just not where he's at nowadays. I'm grateful for any new release from Ye. I think he's a brilliant artist and still very much a vital artist that I am absolutely always paying attention to. You know, I know he's had some struggles with mental health. There is a line on this album about the Jews, about whether or not they're going to get into heaven. It feels very tongue-in-cheek, and, you know, it's like he doesn't want to apologize for who he is. And I get it, you know. It's like I think that we live in a culture now where everyone's expected to think the same way, and he just doesn't. He's not going to conform, and I respect that. Even when he goes off on some crazy rant that I don't agree with, I'm glad that he's speaking his mind and being true to himself. That's so rare in an artist nowadays. He even said it like himself, like that it feels like we're in the novel 1984 where everyone's got to think the same thing and be the same person over and over again. And if you step out of line, they're going to make you disappear. I do feel like that sometimes in our society. So I like that there's a person like Ye out there who's like unfiltered. And we'll see what happens. I haven't heard any word of a Vultures 3. As soon as Vultures 1 came out, there was already talk of Vultures 2. So that leads me to believe that if there was a Vultures 3, we probably would have heard about it already. It seems like all of these songs on both of these albums were probably created in one long stretch of creativity, and that would explain why Fried sounds like a continuation of the same idea that you heard on Carnival, because all these songs were probably created in like one batch of work. It would also explain why Young Thug is featured on here, even though Young Thug is currently facing criminal charges and in custody. That's just my theory. There's probably more information about that available online if you look for it. I hope you enjoyed my review. Please like and subscribe to my channel. I will be doing a lot more reviews coming up. I know some of you guys really love the reviews, and I kind of fell off for a while. I'm back, and I'm staying back. I'm staying consistent with this. You guys have spoken. I can see that this is what you guys want to hear from me, so I'm going to keep it coming. Stay tuned for more reviews on this channel. Bombs away.